was not not part of any previous discussion. And then the next day, the governor offered a clarification, which again, I very much appreciate. The clarification said that it would not cost the city a penny, and alternative means would be worked on, which again, will start hopefully as early as next week, and we'll see what that yields. So what I can say to you is I believe, based on what we're hearing now, that there will not be a cut, but let's take your theoretical question. Clearly, we have a CUNY system that is trying to reach a lot of young people and give them opportunity and straining to do that. And if you were to take $500 million out, it would mean any number of potentially negative scenarios. Obviously, a lot fewer kids being served in one way or another. And let's face it, the kinds of things we're trying to do, like the investment in STEM education, so kids can get, young people can get the education and go straight into the workforce, that would be undercut fundamentally. Or if you think about other areas of the city budget, if you tried to move those cuts elsewhere, where would you cut? Would you cut from education? Would you cut from police? So I think it's fair to say that this would be a very, very major impact. But again, we're going to take the governor on his word and follow through in a very transparent fashion on that, so that these cuts will not be seen and will not have an impact on our young people.
Well, let me just share with you, Mr. Mayor, that I will be looking forward to monitor the situation to ensure that these efficiencies or administrative reforms don't actually turn into a cut, because I think that would be very damaging to the CUNY system if that is the case. And so I will monitor the situation, and if we're talking about trimming the fat, as is often called, or some minor administrative changes, that's acceptable. But I know that I've been here long enough to know that a cut is a cut. And so I am deeply concerned that that will dramatically impact CUNY, which continues to be a beacon of hope and opportunities. CUNY is the Harvard, the Yale, the Cornell of our working class and middle class communities. And so to potentially absorb a cut of this magnitude puts a hit on the future of the city and the state of New York. On another matter, Mr. Mayor, let me commend you for your interest in tackling the affordability problem in the city, particularly when it comes to affordable housing. And your administration has proposed mandatory inclusionary zoning as the model to address the issue of affordability in housing in the city of New York. And whereas that may yield some affordable units, many people across the city, community boards, myself, and others, are concerned that this particular model, whereas it may yield some affordable units, it could also unleash market forces and gentrification to a level that many working class and middle class families will be hurt. In my particular district, we have already begun to see speculation. And so yesterday's New York Times published an article that highlighted the Rockaways and in East Harlem as two neighborhoods that have seen how affordable housing can be built. You yourself was at a ribbon-cutting ceremony in my district where Broadway Housing opened up a full 100% affordable housing company. Why not build affordable housing? Why can't we not build 100% affordable housing and that guarantees poor people, working people that are really the ones hurting in the housing crunch? Wow. Because I think by engaging in the 70-30, 80-20 model, we are exposing communities like the ones that I serve that have 90% of the housing stock rent stabilized privately owned buildings, subject to the market, and landlords and owners will come in and buy off tenants. It would unleash a whole series of practices that eventually result in losing more affordable housing that you have produced. And so this is the essence of the fear. I don't think it's just like a frenzy in the community boards that we see maybe regularly on a host of issues. This is a deep-seated concern that communities have across the city of New York. It has manifested itself in the Bronx, unanimously in Queens, and even in Manhattan. God knows we never agree on anything on Manhattan, but it's deep-seated, and I am concerned that the mandatory inclusionary zoning, although well-intended to produce X amount of affordable affordable housing units, that it will in fact result in the displacement of hundreds and thousands of families that are living in working class communities around these developments, that will witness a dramatic shift in the values of those properties, and subsequently there goes the rent. So I am concerned about this. I would like to see from the city good faith, and that you come to these neighborhoods and you build affordable housing. It's been done in the past. The New York Times said yesterday that it was done successfully in the Rockaways and in East Harlem, and it's been done in my district. Why not start that way and not with the mandatory exclusionary zoning?
Well, I appreciate the question, Senator, because you're getting to the heart of the matter on many levels. First of all, I want to be clear in my view of the community board's response. I'm not trying to in any way stereotype it. I'm saying I do think community boards have a history of being dubious of all types of development. I don't think that's an unfair statement. I think everyone who's worked with community boards, I spent 8 years working closely with the community boards in my district when I was a councilman. We know that's a pretty consistent reality. At the same time, I agree with you, whether it's community boards or community activists or clergy, people are speaking up out of deep concern and fear about displacement. And I've tried to speak bluntly to it, and I started that process a year ago in my State of the City speech, because honestly, here's what I think is the bigger picture. I don't think the issue of gentrification has been honestly discussed in the city over 10 or 20 years as it has been growing as a phenomenon. I don't think there was an honest debate about what it meant, about the impact it was having, about what we could do about it, what was the role of public policy, what should we do differently. None of that happened. And in the previous administration, with all due respect to them, there was, I think, a kind of laissez-faire approach wherein market forces dominated the entire playing field. As you know, a lot of this city is in an as-of-right status where developers have the right to work within the existing zoning and can do a lot within it. The areas that are now being discussed for rezoning are relatively few in the scheme of things. A lot of rezoning happened in the previous administration already. So, and what we found in the previous approach was that there were not particularly stringent demands put on developers in terms of affordable housing, and even some of the plans that were agreed to with communities were not honored. So that has bred a lot of cynicism, rightfully, in communities about any affordable housing plan. I think it's fair to say I have a very different approach. I think I've proven that on many levels. What I saw, and maybe it has to do with personal experience, what I saw happen in my neighborhood in Brooklyn and in surrounding neighborhoods, I can certainly say this about Bed-Stuy, I can say this about Bushwick, I can say this about a lot of places, is in the absence of a policy, the market forces simply created the displacement. They didn't need rezonings. It just kept happening and happening with no compensating impact in favor of the community. So if you literally said, if we just walked away now, we said, let the market determine all of this, you would see more and more people displaced. You would not see new affordable housing built in an appreciable number, because if we just took the part out of our plan that did not benefit from some type of private sector activity, it'd be a much, much smaller number. We'd never get to 200,000 units. So we would have a lot less affordable housing being built. We'd still have a lot of people being displaced. We wouldn't have the opportunity to do a lot of good things in communities through rezonings. And you know as well as I do, rezoning is an opportunity to do a lot of the capital improvements to a community. A lot of the things that have been unaddressed previously can be addressed, and we're very committed to it. We put a very substantial allotment in our capital budget to address infrastructure needs with rezonings, and that was not true in the past. We've tried to be upfront about the fact if communities need more schools or new schools, parks, whatever it happens to be, that's going to be factored into the rezoning process. We obviously have a heavy emphasis on creating local jobs. So I would say it this way. I think it's a pretty stark contrast. Let the market decide, period. You'll get most of the same unfortunate outcomes for a lot of community residents without any of the compensating positive factors. Under our plan, you will get an unprecedented amount of affordable housing. You'll get job creation, which will be as much as possible targeted to local residents. You'll get community improvements and capital improvements. The other part of the equation, which you know very well, and we all grapple with, is the units that are going out of rent regulation. And I know you and a lot of your colleagues have fought to strengthen rent regulation. I know you've found a certain amount of resistance in that process, but we still lose a lot of units, even with the recent improvements, which we appreciate. We lose a lot of units out of rent regulation. We lose a lot of units out of Mitchell-Lama. If we had not stepped in with our housing plan to stop 5,000 units at Stuytown and Peter Cooper from being privatized, we would have lost 5,000 more. Almost 1,000 units at the Riverton in Harlem we would have lost had we not stepped in. So I argue that there has to be an interventionist approach by the city government to the maximum extent possible, and that's the best strategy we have at this moment to preserve affordable housing.
I commend your model. I'm not saying that we should not have an intervention or some kind of regulatory practices to get more for the development that's going on in New York City. What I'm saying to you is that in many neighborhoods, that may be a blessing, because in East Harlem, where you have the highest concentration of NYCHA buildings, people that are protected for 2, 3, 4 generations, maybe that's not so bad. They have the ability to cushion the blow. But in a neighborhood with 90% plus apartments that are rent stabilized, privately owned, where 25% of the leases are preferential rent leases, that means that the landlord has not been able to get the rent that they want. Therefore, they issue a lease for less rent that doesn't guarantee any rent stabilization rights or privileges to the tenant. That landlord is going to go out there, once you build those towers through mandatory inclusionary zoning, that landlord is going to go out there and try to get that market rate. And that tenant is out. That's 1 out of 4 in that immediate area where you're proposing that in our district. So I'm saying is city government and state government, which proposes $20 billion for housing, 10 for affordable housing, 10 to deal with the homeless issue, should not get out of the affordable housing business as we knew it, that really helped communities in the past. You know, Mayor Koch rebuilt the Bronx, you know, when it burned. Freddie Ferrer, the borough president, did a fantastic job of ushering that in. You know, we need that kind of energy again to save neighborhoods. I think that you're well-intended. This is I'm not saying that I think that it's better than what we had in the past. But it doesn't cut the mustard, not for neighborhoods where people are having a tough time making ends meet. And I propose that you get back into the affordable housing business as well.
Just a final comment. I believe, again, a lot of neighborhoods I would not underestimate. If you look at the neighborhoods that had no rezoning activity, but are seeing those preferential rents you point to, that in many neighborhoods is already being swept away just by market activity alone. If it was a zero sum, if you were, for example, if all those preferential rents being kept low, if that was all there was to it, don't do rezoning and they're all going to stay low, that would be an interesting discussion. I don't believe that's what's happening. I think the market dynamics are already sweeping past that, and if we don't intervene, there'll be nothing left in terms of affordability. We have to use every tool we have to create. So I respect deeply your position. I just want you to hear that we believe that, that cow's out of the barn already.
Well, I thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope that we can continue to have this discussion
Absolutely.
with regards to affordability. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyman McDonald. Is he there? Oh, very good. Oh. In his place, Mr. Tatone will make a very quick speech. He's not really doing this.
I know I'm not really permitted to speak, but I just wanted to really thank you publicly for increasing the ferry service on Staten Island. Very much appreciated, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Very much appreciated. It was the right thing to do.
All right, we close on this time.
And ferry service kept going all through the storm. We're proud of that fact. Well, we still have some talking to do there. We will. We will.
Assemblyman Farrell was quite accurate about the briefness of Assemblyman Tatone's.
I wish the other side would understand that.
We have a lot of questions. Next, it would be Senator Squadron.
Thank you. I will take a lesson from Assemblyman Tatone, but not the one you'd like me to. I would like to join him in thanking you for ferry service expansions throughout the city and the investment the city is doing in that. By the way, actually a good segue into my questions. Is the state budget helping with the ferry expansions throughout New York City? No? $0 from the state for ferry expansions.
That's all us.
And last year the state put in, as Senator Savino mentioned, $100 million for NYCHA. This year, how much is the city expecting to get from the state for public housing?
So again, the $100 million that was in the last budget of the state In the current fiscal year for NYCHA, we still have not seen a dime. We would very much like that money to come in so we can do more to fix public housing developments. We welcome a plan from the state. We're ready to get to work doing this work.
Sorry to cut you, but once you get the $100 million, is NYCHA's fiscal need satisfied then?
No, not at all, not at all. But the point being, we made a commitment last year when I was here with you that we would do $100 million each year, current fiscal year, next two as well. We have that in our new budget. We ask that the state match that because the need, as I said, there's a $17 billion capital need at NYCHA for the buildings that cover 400,000 people. But that first $100 million still has not arrived. And we believe, we have some strong views on the best use of that money, but we also obviously respect the legislature's prerogatives. Whatever the ultimate decision of the state on how best to use it, we're ready to implement it. We're ready to put that money to work immediately, but we'd ask your help in making sure it shows up as soon as possible.
Great. And the state, again, the city made a 3-year, $100 million a year commitment, and so far the state has not, this year, proposed $100 million equal.
That's right.
At its high water mark, the Advantage, Work Advantage anti-homelessness program, the state was giving the city, I think, $35 million in operating funds for that program.
I think it was higher.
We'll test that, and again, while Sharif and Dean check that question, let me emphasize I appreciate your sense of history because not only was the state contribution to Advantage substantial, but Advantage was working. And about the time Advantage ended, we went from approximately 37,000 people in our shelter system just in the following 2.5 years to 50,000 plus. So really one of the biggest factors in the increase in our shelter population was the absence of Advantage. And it's going to take a long time to recapture that ground and reverse that trend. This is why we're so concerned now to make sure that homelessness funding for the city is equitable and does address some of the things that were cut in the past so we can actually turn this corner. Do you have an answer on that? We'll check in that dollar figure.
And I think it's an important point. The Advantage program needed to be fixed, but and the supportive housing capital dollars are absolutely wonderful that are being proposed by the state, by the governor. But the total statewide homeless prevention program now I think is less than $35 million, which means that's a cut for the city. Earlier you mentioned the BQE triple cantilever, which is in my district. So far, is there any state capital funding allocated for the fixing of the BQE cantilever so that it doesn't fall into Brooklyn Bridge Park and then bounce into the harbor?
Not that we know of at this moment.
Okay, none. Thank you. Resiliency, I want to really thank the administration again for the commitment you've made, Mr. Mayor, and the administration more broadly, $115 million almost from the city alone, support in the federal application that got us $176 million from HUD because of the leadership of the city to get a barrier that protects Lower Manhattan. I think the 3rd or 4th largest business district in America, Lower Manhattan. We talk about having tax dollars and having revenue. We need Lower Manhattan to be working to have revenue in every corner of the state, from Chautauqua County to Suffolk County. So I would just ask, of the $301 million we now have to protect from Montgomery Street around to Battery Park City, how much of that has the state allocated?
We'll have to check that one too for you. We'll get that for you.
I believe it's $8 million.
Okay, we'll double check. Well, you seem to be ahead of us.
Great. The Rikers Island population, obviously Rikers is rife with problems, and I urge the administration to continue aggressive reform there, not rest on its laurels. But one of the drivers of that is a broken speedy trial law in New York State that essentially strips the accused, not the convicted, but the accused of their constitutional speedy trial rights. If we reform the speedy trial laws, we believe the Rikers population could come down significantly. Just as an example, what would the city save if the state fixed speedy trials and the Rikers population, for example, went down 25%?
Well, you may have the exact estimate yourself. I can see that you're well prepared. There's no question. Look, I think you're exactly right that reform would make a big difference both in terms of justice and in terms of the cost at Rikers. We've tried in many ways. Our way of addressing the mass incarceration crisis has been to try to get the root of the matter with Rikers to work on efforts to ensure that people don't end up in Rikers who don't need to. That's some of the bail reform efforts that we're working on, for example, and obviously appropriate diversionary programs for folks who have committed low-level nonviolent offenses. We believe fundamentally in that, and working with the court system to improve the timing of trials so people are not there any longer than they have to. Unquestionably, everything that will help us drive down the population not only saves costs, it will reduce violence. It'll allow us to focus on deepening the reforms we've made. So we can get you exact dollar figures that could be projected, but there's no question that's exactly in the direction we need to go to break the back of what's been, you know, many, many years of a cycle of violence at Rikers that's unacceptable.
Look, just in summary, like each of these issues are critical issues that impact New York City uniquely in the state. They also speak to this idea that because New York City is as fiscally healthy as it is right now, the state doesn't need to worry about it, and in fact, should start trying to figure out how to, damage it even further. There have been cuts to the state support over a number of years. We talked about AIM funding earlier. We just talked about these on critical, really city-specific issues, not unique, but city-specific issues. And so I would just urge that you do continue to be responsible with your budget. You do shore dollars away for a rainy day fund. Goodness knows if the history of New York City, we've seen that. We saw that 8 years ago. We saw that through the 90s, off and on. But also, I want you to know that from the state perspective, this idea that you're a piggy bank can't work. What we need to be doing is figuring out how to save you money so that you can save more money, and also so that the areas where we are providing state aid, we can provide less so that we can send it to other parts of the state that are in desperate need of it and could use the economic development and the support in other ways. Just briefly, one thing the state did do last year is increase the funding for Nurse-Family Partnership, one of the evidence-based maternal home visiting programs, in combination with Healthy Families in New York State, the kind of the big combination. This year, the current proposal is to reduce that funding again. I just want to be very clear. If we are able to reduce the funding in the state, because the city has been a longtime supporter of this program, is the city willing to match us dollar for dollar with city dollars in any amount of money that we increase the Nurse-Family Partnership Program?
I want to do two things. I want to give Dean and Sharif an opportunity to gather themselves for that answer. I want to go back a step on your previous answer, or previous question. You make a very powerful point. There are actions that the state can take that will save the city money, will be in everyone's interests. We had a very, I think, respectful and informed discussion earlier about how the city and state interrelate and what our relationship is. Well, one of the things that is good for everyone, speeding up trials, avoiding longer stays in Rikers is in everyone's interest. The same as having effective preventative efforts in terms of homelessness. Long ago when I was chairman of the General Welfare Committee and the Council, I talked about the fact that when you prevent a family from going into shelter, for example, with a $1,000 rental subsidy, that's $12,000 a year, that family goes into shelter, it is $36,000, $37,000, $40,000 a year. From the taxpayer point of view, it's not even close, nor, of course, on the human level, what it means for that family. So the points you raise are ways that the state can help us to save a lot of money, which is in both the state and the city's interest. On the Nurse-Family Partnership, you're right, we believe in the value of that program. To the question of
we
match.
should continue the conversation with you and see what kind of dollars you're talking about, but you're right.
Well, as a minimum commitment, as up here, Senator Savino, Senator Gallivan, and I, in a tripartisan way, fight for more dollars for this program, can we at least be clear that the city will not reduce its own contribution, even if the state increases it?
We're not reducing the contribution.
You will not reduce the contribution of the state. I appreciate that.
And just on the Advantage program, the state contribution was $75 million. The
75.
The federal contribution, which flows through the state, was also an additional $75 million, and the city contribution was $75 million.
Thank you very much. And to the mayor's point, to the budget director, I would point out that a proposal I long ago made called prevention-based budgeting would make it a lot easier to balance the budget while also funding evidence-based proven programs to prevent homelessness, to prevent incarceration through home visiting and other programs. So I would urge you to take a look at that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Next speaker is Senator Perkins.
Can you hear me? Of course. Thank you very much. I want to first express my appreciation for your presence and your indulgence with us, and also for what you've been doing so far and representing us as the mayor. And I think I did the right thing by supporting you.
Thank you.
It's always a good thing when you hit
You're a visionary.
when you hit the numbers, so to speak. I'm not a visionary, but I think I got lucky with this one. But I'm concerned, I'm very concerned, because as a native New Yorker, we have a little extra pride about ourselves, and because of this great city. And it's not simply because of the bridges, like the Brooklyn Bridge, or the statues, like the Statue of Liberty, or other iconic features that are world-renowned, but actually, most importantly, because of its public education system.
Amen.
This was the opportunity that, for many of us, allowed us to be where we are today, and even for many others, other places even greater. But what's happening is that which was sort of the crown jewel of all the jewels in our New York City ego has sort of come under hard times in terms of bragging rights, so to speak. Ergo, charter schools. You understand? And the infiltration of those schools, overwhelming attention from the public schools without even necessarily measuring up in terms of what they're actually providing, nevertheless being promoted and applauded, most importantly with more and more money. And my concern is, are we abandoning our public education commitment and fooling ourselves into saying that this other arrangement, which is a privatized model, is the way to go?
No. I understand the concern for sure. And maybe there's some voices that believe in that, but not this administration. We believe, first of all, look, we want to serve every child in the city. They're all, our collective future. So I'm very proud of the efforts that we've made together with parochial schools and charter schools to reach all our kids who need our help, and that's something we believe in. But I say that at the same time as I'm very comfortable saying the future of New York City will be determined by its traditional public schools, because the traditional public schools are where the vast majority of our students are. And those schools have to improve fundamentally. The status quo that existed when I came into office wasn't acceptable. As I mentioned, a third of our kids reading at third grade level, well under half of even our of our high school graduates being college ready. These are not acceptable realities. So what we believe in is really going at the heart of the matter. To fix our traditional public schools, again, the mother lode here of our education system, we have to do a lot in the way of new investments. Early childhood, particularly in the vein of pre-K, a very focused effort to bring kids to reading level by third grade. That's part of our Equity and Excellence Plan. After-school programs for every middle school child for free, unlimited. Algebra for all for middle school kids. AP classes for all, every high school. Computer science for all throughout the curriculum at all grade levels. 130 community schools, renewal schools. These are all part of a fundamental change in our approach to our public education system. So I think the answer to your question is, in our city, we are doubling down on our commitment on our public schools, and we have to transform them for the 21st century. And I believe that model is going to be much more effective than looking to other models, which so far have obviously been, one, limited in terms of the number of people they reach, but two, as you said, different models, some very successful, some not so successful, some very collaborative, some not so collaborative, some that were very inclusive of English language learners, special ed kids, et cetera, some not so. We like the traditional public school model because it's always inclusive.